This is not her car.
A family in danger.
Oh, Dad.
They are terrorizing this family.
Oh, my God.
An unlikely criminal.
Drop the gun.
Frighteningly out of control.
This footage is shocking.
He has no problem pulling the trigger.
A delivery man saves the day.
Oh, my God.
The man goes flying above and beyond.
And a video that gives reckless driving a whole new meaning.
Wake up!
This officer was very confused.
He just rammed it into my car.
It's almost like a scene out of The Walking Dead.
He was being terrorized with his children in the car.
Get out of my way.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Dad. Dad.
February 28, 2020, Spokane, Washington. As a dad and his 2 teenage kids pull out of a parking lot, a stranger suddenly gets right in front of them.
This woman with a bicycle insisting that this man has stolen her car.
Look out, man. Look out, man.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
Man, get out the way, man.
She's following him and she insists that this is her car. She's blocking traffic, she's in his way, she's keeping him from driving, and he's annoyed about it.
The driver tells his kids to pull out their phones.
Court.
I am.
Press 911.
Max, call. Max, call.
I am with honey. Get your ass out my way. Get your ass out my way. Get your ass out my way. Get the out from me.
He's just trying to figure out what's going on and get his family away to safety.
Then, things get even scarier.
Other people start to come in.
You see all these strangers threatening a driver.
One man is hiding a hand inside his jacket.
What is he doing?
I was very afraid that someone was going to break a window or that someone was going to pull out a gun. They are terrorizing this family.
Dad!
Hello?
The crowd closes in.
Lock your door.
We don't know who these people are. We don't know how many there are. We don't know what their motives are.
They kick and punch the car. And when one man aggressively tries to open the driver's side door, the family's panic escalates.
Yeah.
Dad.
What you doing? This is not her car. This is not her car.
Dad!
Get out of the car. Get out. This is not her car. Not her car. This is not her car.
Dad.
Hello? We need help. Hey. Man,
Oh, Dad. Dad.
Dad, go.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Dad. Dad.
People behave very differently. Once they take on that mob mentality, a switch goes off in the human brain when you're part of a mob, and suddenly you're doing things that you might not otherwise do.
And when the dad desperately tries to drive off,
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my. Oh, no.
A man gets on the hood of the car to keep them from getting away.
a 911 operator is listening to all of it.
I can't see anything. They're using bikes to hit my car. They're trying to open my doors. I got 2 kids in the car with me.
This is a pretty long attack. 10 minutes can seem like 10 hours when your life is at risk.
Finally, the driver sees an opening in the mob, so he takes a chance and floors it.
Oh my God, no, 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 Dad. Oh my God. Oh my God, Dad, the door.
As they peel out of the parking lot, the daughter turns her camera around.
Daddy's on a motorcycle.
They start chasing this family.
Like, I got about 6 people attacking my car. Somebody just rode on my car.
No, Dad.
They're getting my car with motorcycles and bicycles.
He was on the phone with the police. He was trying to literally navigate around these people.
Daddy's behind you.
After a harrowing drive, the family finally escapes the mob. But when the dad, Lee Allen, follows up with police, they tell him they're unable to locate any of the people involved.
This father really felt like police did not get the magnitude of what happened. He was being terrorized with his children in the car. They were legitimately in danger.
Hello, we need help.
Oh, Dad. Dad.
So Lee decides to post the terrifying video, and it gets more than 1 million views.
The reason was to show people what he went through so that they could see how serious this was.
Even after the video goes viral, no charges are filed. In comments, people are infuriated, saying they understand Lee's frustration.
Dad.
There must be so much comfort in the response that he's gotten. In so many people saying, you were in danger and you did everything right. This was a group of people who were attacking their family car and chasing them. Their father was calling for help. It's going to trigger so many feelings of anxiety and fear, and it might take quite a while for them to get over this. My heart goes out to this father.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Dad. Dad.
And coming up next, amazing video of a worker who jumps in to save the day and still makes his delivery.
Serving up both pizza and justice.
He flew through the air. My biggest game-winning save, for sure.
April 16th, 2023, Brookhaven, Pennsylvania.
It was a Sunday around 1 o'clock. Just a pretty normal day for me. I mean, delivering pizza. I was probably on my 4th or 5th delivery.
Tyler Morrell is standing at a customer's door when chaos erupts behind him.
I hear a screech, and the siren's right after him. It's a 25-mile-an-hour school zone. So I knew something was awry.
That's a high-speed chase.
With the pizza still in hand, Tyler goes to take a closer look.
Oh my God, Jaeger! Oh my God, Jaeger!
Suddenly, the driver who was in a stolen car jumps out to make a run for it.
I have no idea if the suspect is armed or dangerous.
The runaway suspect is fast, but he's in for a big surprise.
Out of the 360 different directions the person could have run, he runs towards the biggest person on the road.
The man goes flying after Tyler trips him. He takes off into air.
I love a pizza delivery man who just having a normal day and then something outrageous happens around him and he's kind of like, I've just been delivering pizzas all day. I want to get involved.
I was shocked pizza was not flying everywhere. Tyler has a size 14 shoe. That's definitely one you're gonna trip on.
The 17-year-old suspect is immediately arrested.
I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just trying to help the situation.
It turns out being fast on his feet comes naturally to Tyler.
I'm on my 21st year of playing lacrosse goalie competitively, and I made 1,000 leg saves in my career. I'm 6'8", and my leg is probably 4 feet long. I view that as probably my biggest game-winning save, for sure.
The video quickly goes viral, turning Tyler into an overnight celebrity.
The pizza delivery driver is getting some community love for going above and beyond.
Helping catch a suspected car thief without ever dropping the pizza.
All the major news networks reached out to me within 24 hours, calling my parents' house, trying to get a hold of me.
People applaud Tyler for stepping up. He's even praised by the police chief.
We would tell people that we don't want them to get involved because we don't want anybody to get hurt. But in this case, I mean, this is a gentleman that obviously believes in his community.
But Tyler takes it all in humble stride.
I don't call myself a crime fighter. People have called me Pizza Batman.
Tyler was just kind of like, oh, yeah, I did that. Another day, another pizza. He's so chill.
The 17-year-old driver is arrested and charged as a juvenile. At the end of the day, Tyler is a hero in more ways than one, going back to the house to make sure his customers got what they ordered.
I think that Tyler still delivering the pizza to the family and putting his best foot forward was the best outcome anyone could have asked for.
But no one is sure what the outcome will be in this next horrifying video.
A 93-year-old man
Pulling out a gun.
This footage is shocking.
Drop the gun! Drop it now!
January 2nd, 2020, Las Vegas, Nevada. 93-year-old Robert Thomas has a complaint to lodge at his apartment complex about a leaky pipe.
Anytime you see an older person, I think there's just a part of you that doesn't think they're going to be a big threat.
Oddly, Thomas asks the assistant manager to call the police, and then he does something that nobody sees coming.
He pulls out this gun. This is where it gets terrifying.
As Thomas threatens to fire the gun, the manager keeps her cool.
She is very calm. You do not want to antagonize or fluster someone who is pointing a firearm at you.
But this old man is not playing around.
Normally people wave around guns and it's just like a threat, but it's loaded. He shoots it into the back of the room, it hits a computer.
As the terrified people at the desk sit frozen in shock, another employee quietly tries to back out of the way. They have no idea why this man has turned violent. The manager, who is now on the phone with police, edges toward the door.
He actually lets her leave the office to continue the phone call to the police.
For a moment, it seems like Thomas is calming down, but then
he just shoots him in the leg.
At very close range.
The man falls out of his chair.
This is horrifying. The victim is wailing in pain, while Thomas is coldly indifferent.
This man is standing over him with a gun.
Police are racing to the scene.
Unit B advisor, shots fired.
But will they get there before this turns deadly?
He is only a foot or so away from him. He's probably begging for his life. This guy has already proven he has no problem pulling the trigger.
As officers enter the parking lot,
Shots still being fired.
He shoots him a second time.
now the victim is clinging to life.
This was a nightmare for this man.
We gotta make entry.
They hear gunshots. They can see somebody standing with a gun over a man who is on the ground.
Hey! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop it now! Drop it!
He was immediately taken into custody.
The 93-year-old is hit with a laundry list of charges, including attempted murder, kidnapping, and burglary with a deadly weapon. The shocking video goes viral, with many people surprisingly sympathetic towards the elderly gunman. In court, Thomas claims he didn't intend to hurt anyone.
I didn't want to hurt you guys. Okay. I just wanted to stir up a little.
They are in Vegas. You almost wonder, is he ex-mafia? For him to go straight to a firearm over a leak, it feels like he's dealt with issues like this in this way in the past.
Police say Thomas had no prior criminal history. Luckily, the victim, who was shot twice in the leg, recovers. Nobody is sure what prompted the old man's dangerous tirade.
They said he was upset about flooding in his apartment, but is that justification for bringing a gun into the apartment complex's office? Given this man's age and then what we see in the mugshot, I think there's a very good chance that we were dealing with some age-related dementia, some reduced mental faculties. Eyes tell a lot. You look at this man's eyes in the mugshot and he clearly does not seem okay.
But before anyone gets to the bottom of it, things take a turn. Thomas passes away in police custody of natural causes. It had been 4 months since the shooting, and he was awaiting trial.
He was actually being evaluated for his competency to stand trial. So there are real questions here about if he was okay.
Although viral commenters still wonder if maybe after 93 years, this old guy had just completely run out of patience.
Drop the gun! Drop it now! Drop it!
Coming up next, a viral reckless driver. Unlike anything you've ever seen before.
He just rammed it into my car.
Whoa! Hey! Hey!
This officer was very confused.
Hey! Stop your horse!
Asleep at the reins.
He just rammed it into my car.
May 14th, 2022, Orwell, Ohio. It's 2:30 a.m. when a sheriff's deputy responds to a call about a reckless driver.
Whoa!
When he arrives, he's in for a shock.
Whoa!
It's a horse and buggy with no driver in sight.
I have to imagine that this officer was very confused because he sees the horse, he sees the buggy, but he doesn't see the driver. He must have been asking himself what happened to him.
Hey! Hey!
This buggy just completely bypasses him. The horse acts like he doesn't even see him.
Hey! Hey!
But then he sees it. There is someone inside the buggy, a young man who is unresponsive.
Is he okay? Does he need medical attention? Did he pass out? Maybe he was just really tired.
As another officer pulls up, the deputy figures it out.
There's a Bud Light can sitting in there and he's passed clean out.
And this is not your typical drunk driver. He's an Amish man.
I didn't know drunk and Amish could go together in the same sentence.
But the deputy isn't overly concerned.
He'll go home. The horse knows how to get home.
Actually, he's right. Horses do know how to get home. So the horse was probably headed home because he wanted to eat some hay and go to sleep.
The officers trail behind as the horse leads the way.
He's eastbound on Vogue. Got a drunk Amish guy passed out in a buggy, and I hit the side of the buggy and hollered at the guy. He's passed clean out.
This officer knows he has a job to do. He knows he has to protect the public, but come on, this is pretty comical.
The horse won't stop, huh?
No.
This is one of the slowest chases in history.
Frustrated with the leisurely trot, the officers decide it might be easier to stop the horse and get the man out.
I'm gonna see if I can get in front of him and slow down.
We might have it stopped. Nope. Disregard. He just rammed it into my car. Nope.
The crash jolts the drunk man awake.
Hey! Stop your horse! Stop your horse! Stop your horse! Get your horse!
He woke up, probably was going through a lot in his head, and one of the things was probably like, is this why I'm never supposed to drink?
He's soon surrounded by a small crowd of curious residents and laughing officers.
Orwell's in pursuit of a buggy. I'm like, no effing way. And they're like, no, yes, he is. And I was like, okay. So I left you with the cows. I come down here.
Officers are now coming in hot. They're like, oh, is the car damaged? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do with the buggy?
We saw over the back. Maybe puke, I don't know.
Police managed to get 21-year-old Nathan Miller out of the buggy and into handcuffs.
Dude, don't be hit. Head. He gets in and hits his head.
He's charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated.
Buggies are technically considered vehicles, and not for nothing, but they are capable of hurting or injuring people. I mean, imagine coming face to face with a rogue buggy when you're behind the wheel of a car.
Video of the unusual incident hits the news.
A horse buggy driver asleep at the reins.
An Amish buggy on the run. The buggy's driver out of commission.
and nabbed some 200,000 views as armchair comedians have a field day. Miller pleads no contest, serves 3 days, and pays $5,200 in restitution.
If this all was the consequence of like one light beer, was it worth it?
A man with an ominous weapon.
Police, stop!
This situation's about to get really bad.
Has an officer fighting for his life. Airplane passengers dangerously out of control.
A wild scene on a plane.
Like watching a horror movie.
Knocking out 2 of her teeth.
I will kill every man on this plane!
He's out of control.
And an unlikely hero.
This white bunny comes in to save the day.
With dark secrets.
Accused of, well, being a bad bunny.
Is he a hero or did he actually turn out to be a bad guy?
I got it all, bro!
A chilling attack.
This video is horrific.
This is a matter of life and death.
Cameras right here. Catch every terrifying moment.
You know this situation's about to get really bad.
October 15th, 2020, Seattle, Washington. Police get a call about a violent man making threats with a hammer at a homeless camp. Officer Caleb Palmazan is first on the scene, but the man is already on the run.
All right, he's gonna be in the alley.
This officer is communicating over the radio that there's an individual, maybe about 100 feet ahead.
And now he's wielding a different and dangerous weapon.
He's just walking down the alley southbound with the stick on fire, and it is very on fire. Hey, Seattle police, stop!
This suspect is being defiant. He's non-compliant.
You can see that this suspect is not listening, has no intentions of stopping at this point.
Seattle police, stop, dude!
When the officer starts to engage with him, the offender turns his sights on the police officer himself. Once he makes a beeline for the officer's vehicle, you know this situation's about to get really bad.
There is absolutely nothing stopping this officer from getting burned because the driver's side window is down.
There probably wasn't 1 second where this officer thought that this individual was going to turn around and throw this flaming piece of wood inside the patrol vehicle.
Horrifyingly, the flaming weapon hits the officer in the thigh. Terrified he will be burned alive, the officer backs up with the flaming stick still in his car and opens fire.
This officer absolutely had the right to use lethal force in this situation. There's no doubt that that piece of firewood could have seriously injured or even killed this officer.
The gunshots miss the suspect and he quickly disappears. As his burning patrol car rolls backwards, the officer manages to escape out the passenger door and frantically plead for help.
Shots fired, through the thick of me.
This officer escaped just in time. Thankfully, he was able to make it out alive.
And in a situation like this, seconds can be the difference between life and death.
When other officers arrive, they chase the suspect into a nearby parking garage using a taser to arrest him.
The patrol car goes up in flames and is a complete loss.
The fiery encounter tops the news.
The moment when a man attacked a Seattle police officer.
This Seattle police car torched and completely destroyed.
The officer's body cam video goes viral with more than 1 million views.
Stop, dude!
I cannot imagine being in a situation like that. And anyone listening to the radio that day, I can only imagine that their hearts may have dropped when they heard this. This could have been a horrific situation.
The suspect is identified as 37-year-old Brian Joseph Leal. He pleads guilty to assault with a deadly weapon and arson. He is sentenced to 6 years in prison.
We later learned that this individual stated he wanted to die at the hands of the officers, a suicide by cop.
Officer Parmesan suffers non-life-threatening burns to his leg and both hands, but he's grateful he survived.
This could have been a lot worse. If he got stuck in that vehicle, he could have lost his life.
Having a piece of lumber that's on fire coming at you is not something you hear about every day. This is one brave officer.
Seattle police, stop, dude!
Something else you don't hear about every day is the wildly out-of-control airplane rage in these next viral videos.
Sit down! Sit down!
It's just so gruesome.
With smaller seats and fewer amenities, airplane meltdowns are increasingly common. And in the air, rage can boil over in an instant.
You just don't know what's going to happen.
On this flight to San Diego, in the midst of the pandemic, everyone is on edge. The plane is descending when a passenger refuses to buckle her seatbelt or secure her mask.
Sit down! Don't you dare! Don't you dare!
You don't really expect what happens next.
We are gonna do you!
The woman violently punches a flight attendant, drawing blood.
Almost as like watching a horror movie where it's fake blood, but this is real life.
Another passenger jumps in to calm things down.
Don't you dare touch her! Don't you dare touch a flight attendant like that!
She came at her first.
Sit down! Sit down!
This male passenger jumped immediately into action and was able to de-escalate the situation, which really shocked me in a good way.
When the plane lands, 29-year-old Viviana Quinones is arrested for interfering with flight attendant directions. The traumatized attendant is badly bruised and requires stitches. Video of the attack in the air makes news.
A woman from Sacramento was accused of punching a flight attendant in the face, knocking out 2 of her teeth.
And a viral splash. Quinones is sentenced to 15 months and ordered to pay more than $30,000 in fines and restitution.
We are gonna do you!
And coming up, you won't believe the radical measures it takes to contain this unruly passenger. You never know who is going to lose their cool when you're in the air.
No goddamn idea what's coming for you!
On this flight to Miami, an inebriated young man comes unhinged.
My parents are worth goddamn dollars!
A lot of people have their cell phones out, they're recording him.
You guys suck!
The man yells at other passengers.
That guy is the most wholesome person!
He is literally the really annoying, obnoxious drunk guy on the plane.
And he has already groped 2 female flight attendants.
He's touched one of the flight attendants' backsides, which is a big no-no.
Communication are against the truth. Both of you suck.
And when told back off, he kind of doesn't do that at all.
You have no goddamn idea what's coming for you.
Things are only getting more and more extreme.
When a flight attendant tries to intervene, the situation explodes. But this quick-thinking employee finds a creative way to get control. Now, the man is literally duct taped to his seat.
There's a lot of duct tape in this situation.
Wrapped from head to toe, looking like a mummy, unable to even so much as lift a pinky finger.
The goal is to get on the ground as safely as you can without anyone being injured, including this person.
When the plane lands, 22-year-old Maxwell Berry is arrested on charges of assault. Video of the duct tape ordeal quickly goes viral and hits the news.
This wild video, an unruly passenger throwing punches
And the flight attendant tells reporters he's glad the tape restraint worked.
It worked perfectly and no one got hurt because of how we did what we did.
Barry is sentenced to 60 days, ordered to pay $4,000 in fines, and gets 1 year of supervised release. But his drunk rant is tame compared to the terror another airline passenger unleashes in this next viral video.
Where's Homeland Security? Pull the gun!
A wild scene on a plane.
This situation takes a terrifying turn.
I will kill everybody on this plane!
March 23rd, 2023. A passenger on a flight from LA to Boston makes terrifying threats.
I will kill every man on this plane!
Lisa Olson is traveling home with her husband and daughter.
We were about 45 minutes from landing, and we heard this guy in back of us talking loudly.
Point the gun at me so I can show everybody!
His voice was just getting louder and louder.
Wherever in my body!
Lisa and her husband pull out their phones to start recording.
And then I will kill every man on this plane!
No one knows what this man is capable of because he's making threats that are life or death.
Where's Homeland Security? Pull the gun, and I will kill every man on this plane!
He was screaming, saying, I'm gonna kill every man on the plane.
You're not gonna try and stop me, huh? You're gonna see them shoot me down.
A lot of the other people around him were kind of just trying to be invisible. So at this point, my daughter's crying. She's sitting next to the window and just sobbing. She thought we were going down.
Step away from me. I don't care if I'm scared of you.
When a flight attendant tries to reason with the man,
I don't care.
he only gets more agitated.
They're gonna have to shoot me down today. Remember that. Where are they diverting us? Because wherever it is, there's gonna be a bloodbath.
Is he really trying to take this plane down right now?
Well, tell them to bring SWAT to shoot me down, because they're gonna have to shoot me down today.
The flight attendants try to come up with a game plan.
They were trying to prevent, anything from getting down to the cockpit. You can tell that they were panicked. They don't have control over the situation.
You can all run away if you want. And then you can run. I won't kill you. I'm Balthazar.
This situation takes a terrifying turn.
I'm taking over this plane.
Dude, I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you.
The man is brandishing a sharp object.
I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you right now. Okay, yeah, he can't get by that.
And now he's trying to hurt people.
I need you to grab him down. Grab him down.
Multiple men jumped up from their seats, a line of people just chasing him. He had the weapon and attempted to stab the flight attendant in the neck 3 times. And there were probably 5 men that were holding him down because at that point he was still screaming and out of control.
Someone manages to zip tie him, but he breaks through one tie after another. Passengers frantically search for other restraints.
When they ran out of zip ties, people were passing their belts up.
The chaotic scene goes on for 30 excruciating minutes until the plane lands in Boston. Massachusetts State Police arrest 33-year-old Francisco Torres and charge him with attempted interference with flight crew members using a dangerous weapon. When they're safely on the ground, Lisa learns something horrifying. The man also tried to open one of the plane's doors.
Who knows what would have happened if he was able to get the door open.
Lisa shares her video with the news.
Wild scene on a plane heading to Boston. Massachusetts man goes on a rampage during a cross-country flight.
And the story goes viral overnight.
My phone was just blowing up. I had the FBI calling me, and the news stations were in my driveway.
It turns out that Torres has a disturbing history of violence. A judge later deems him not competent to stand trial and orders him to undergo mental health treatment. Lisa and her family are traumatized.
because it was surreal during the whole thing. And then you're like, oh, wait, did this really happen? And I think that's just the emotional part.
But they're determined not to let the ordeal change them.
My husband got on a flight the next morning. My daughter went to school the next morning, and I went to work the next morning.
And Lisa is grateful to all the passengers who stepped in to avert disaster.
People getting up and doing something about the situation, it was amazing.
Coming up next, a crime-fighting superhero unlike any you've seen before.
Easter Bunny, I got it all, bro.
But is he the real deal?
Cell phone video capturing a brawl.
Why is this Easter Bunny wailing on people?
Easter Bunny, I got it all, bro.
Man dressed in the furry costume, hopping into action to break up a fight.
You can't believe what you're seeing.
Hey, Easter Bunny!
April 21st, 2019, Orlando, Florida. A man goes all out to celebrate Easter.
He thought it would be fun to get dressed up as an Easter Bunny on Easter weekend and go bar hopping.
And in his mind, a bunny is some kind of superhero.
We see a woman and a man in a fight, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this white bunny comes in to save the day.
I got it all, bro.
He got in there and he started throwing punches.
We have a hero bunny coming to save the damsel in distress. We want to know who is in the bunny costume.
Whoever he is, when police arrive, they want the crime-fighting bunny to step aside.
It's over with, so stop.
They pull up on the scene and they see the Easter Bunny in a fight with two people. They warn him that if they saw him doing something like this again, he would get arrested.
The bunny doesn't seem too bothered. He's too busy posing for pictures.
Because, you know, how often do you get to be a hero?
Video of the bunny saving the day quickly goes viral.
This is one of those videos that goes viral for all the right reasons. It's shocking, it's funny, you can't believe what you're seeing.
And the Orlando Easter Bunny wastes no time capitalizing on his 15 minutes of fame.
It seems that this bunny really liked the attention, because right after this goes viral, he wants to keep the momentum going. He creates a social media account as the bunny, showing what the bunny is up to.
The man behind the suit turns out to be 20-year-old Antoine McDonald. He nicknames himself Bad Bunny and is soon all over the news. His paws of fury.
The man dressed in the furry costume, hopping into action to break up a fight.
He starts doing interviews, showing his real face.
With me trying to break up the fight, it led him to get on top of her and hit her. So then I had to try different methods, basically, to break up the fight, which actually worked.
But for Bad Bunny, the publicity is not a wise move.
A lot of people were watching, including some in law enforcement who had been looking for him. It turns out that he was wanted in multiple states for a variety of offenses.
He's a person of interest in Florida for a 2019 carjacking and 2 armed robberies. He also has an outstanding warrant in New Jersey for car burglary.
If you did something and the police issue a warrant for your arrest, just because it was a few years ago, it doesn't like expire. They're still looking for you. And that's exactly what happened here.
Some of Bad Bunny's fans argue that his past shouldn't matter because now he's a hero. Others blast him for hiding from the law.
There are people who are asking, is he a hero or did he actually turn out to be a bad guy? He stepped in to protect a woman. That is a great thing.
Realizing he has dug himself into a precarious hole, McDonald goes on the lam. It works for 9 months until police
Holly Bristow joining us live here.
And the news catch up to him in January 2020.
Well, Bad Bunny was arrested, accused of, well, being a bad bunny for leaving the scene of a crash.
It happens near Orlando after McDonald loses control of a motorcycle, slams into someone's carport, then flees. Police find him less than a mile away, still dressed in his favorite outfit, which they promptly order him to take off.
As he stands up, his bunny suit falls down and there's Antoine McDonald in his underwear.
Not only now has the law caught up with him, but he also has to shed his bunny identity that he has clung to for all this time. He's forced to take off the bunny costume and to leave the bunny behind forever.
Once in custody, McDonald seems annoyed that the officers don't know who he is.
Do your research. Orlando Easter Bunny.
Clearly, this bunny is delusional. He thinks he's famous.
Do your research. Orlando Easter Bunny.
He thinks he is untouchable because he intervened in one fight.
He's currently behind bars in Florida awaiting sentencing. And given that his bunny antics landed him in jail, his heroics backfired badly.
Knowing that police are looking for him. Maybe he isn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
I got it all, bro. Hey, he's funny. Go. I got it all.
In the late summer of 1975, along the quiet coastal stretch of San Felice Sersio near Rome, nothing in the atmosphere suggested that a crime of extraordinary brutality was about to unfold. The seaside town, with its calm roads and distant rhythm of waves, carried the appearance of a place detached from the darker tensions of the capital. Yet beneath this surface of normality, a chain of decisions had already been set in motion, decisions that would bind 3 young men, 2 young women, and an entire nation into a story that Italy would never fully forget. This is not a story that begins with violence. It begins with invitation, with trust, and with the fragile assumptions young people make about safety in a world that appears familiar. Rosaria Lopez, 19 years old, and Donatella Colasani, 17, were friends navigating life in Rome from a working-class background. They were not part of elite social circles, nor were they connected to the privileged enclaves of wealth that often defined access and opportunity in the city. They lived in a world where an invitation to a party, especially one involving people described as wealthy or socially elevated, could feel like a rare glimpse into something different, something brighter, something promising. That invitation came from 3 young men, Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Gaira. In Rome's social landscape, they were not outsiders. They belonged to a world of privilege, money, and influence, moving within upper-class environments and associated with extremist ideological circles linked to neo-fascist elements. They were not unknown to authorities or to those familiar with their reputation. Izzo in particular had a history that suggested violence and coercion in his interactions with women. Yet none of this was fully visible to Rosaria and Donatella when they accepted what was presented as a harmless social gathering. The invitation itself was carefully framed. It was described as a small party, a casual meeting, a chance to spend time with new friends, with music, alcohol, and an easy social atmosphere. It was the kind of invitation that carried no immediate warning signs for 2 teenagers who had grown up in a city where social mobility often felt tied to chance encounters and introductions. The location chosen for this gathering was a villa in San Felice Sersio, a seaside town south of Rome. The villa stood apart from the noise of urban life, isolated enough to offer privacy, and distant enough to ensure that any disturbance would not easily reach outside attention. On arrival, Rosaria and Donatella would have encountered an environment that initially appeared consistent with the invitation they had been given. There were no immediate signs of danger that would have justified suspicion. But what matters in understanding this case is not only what was visible, but what was controlled. Almost immediately after entering the villa, the structure of their experience changed. The environment that had been presented as social transformed into one of restriction. Their movement became limited, their access to communication was cut off, and the space itself shifted from a place of gathering into a place of containment. The doors that had once represented entry became boundaries of confinement. The presence of Izzo, Guido, and Gaira was no longer that of hosts, but of controllers. The transition was not gradual in the sense of negotiation or misunderstanding. It It was a decisive shift in power. From that moment onward, Rosaria and Donatella were no longer guests. They were held there against their will. What followed over the next approximately 36 hours has been described through investigative records and the testimony of the surviving victim, Donatella Colasani, as a prolonged period of violence, coercion, and psychological and physical domination. The villa became the setting for sustained abuse, where the two young women were subjected to repeated acts of brutality. The perpetrators maintained control through a combination of intimidation and physical force, ensuring that resistance would be met with immediate punishment. Sleep deprivation and forced consumption of alcohol and other substances contributed to a state of disorientation, breaking down the victim's ability to respond or resist in any sustained way. Within this controlled environment, time itself became distorted. Hours did not pass in normal sequence. Instead, they accumulated as cycles of violence and exhaustion. Rosaria Lopez, in particular, endured escalating physical harm that eventually led to her collapse. Her condition deteriorated under the sustained brutality she experienced, and at some point she was taken into a bathroom within the villa. There, she was submerged in a bathtub and killed by drowning after already being weakened by the violence inflicted upon her. Her death marked a turning point in the events, not because it ended the ordeal, but because it intensified the isolation and vulnerability of the surviving victim. Donatella Colasani was by that point severely injured, physically exhausted, and believed by her attackers to be near death or already incapacitated. As the perpetrators prepared to dispose of the situation, both bodies were placed in a car trunk. Rosaria was already dead, and Donatella was placed alongside her. The trunk became another enclosed space of darkness and silence. But it was also the space where an unexpected reversal would occur. At some point during transport, the vehicle was stopped in a secluded area. The perpetrators left the car unattended while they went to eat, creating an unguarded moment within a sequence otherwise defined by total control. Inside the trunk, Donatella regained partial awareness. In that confined space, surrounded by darkness and the body of her friend, she made a critical decision driven not by certainty of survival, but by instinct and necessity. She remained silent initially, likely aware that any premature sound could result in immediate death if discovered. When the opportunity appeared to widen, when the absence of the perpetrators continued, she began striking the interior of the trunk, producing sounds that carried beyond the vehicle. Those sounds were not immediately answered by the perpetrators, but they were heard by someone nearby, a security guard on duty in the area. That moment, small and almost accidental in its origin, became the point at which the entire trajectory of the case shifted. The guard, recognizing that something was wrong, alerted the authorities. Police response followed quickly, leading to the discovery of the vehicle and its contents. Inside, they found Rosaria Lopez dead and Donatella Colasani still alive, though in critical condition and suffering from severe trauma. The brutality of what they uncovered was immediately apparent, even before full details emerged. It was clear that this was not a single act of violence, but a prolonged sequence of abuse that had unfolded over an extended period of time. The case rapidly escalated beyond a local investigation. The severity of the crime, the social background of those involved, and the vulnerability of the victims combined to make it a matter of national attention. Within a short time, investigators began identifying the individuals responsible: Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Guerra. Izzo was arrested first, followed by Guido. Guerra, however, managed to escape and would remain a fugitive, living under assumed identity for years outside Italy before his eventual death in hiding. As the investigation developed, the structure of the case became clearer. This was not an impulsive act, but a coordinated sequence involving confinement, control, and sustained violence within a private space designed to prevent interruption. The villa in Surcio, once an ordinary coastal residence, was redefined through evidence and testimony as the central location of a crime that had unfolded behind closed doors. With the suspects identified and arrests underway, the case moved toward formal judicial proceedings, where the events of those 36 hours would be reconstructed through forensic evidence and, most importantly, the testimony of the surviving victim. Donatella Colasanti's account became essential in establishing the sequence of events, the duration of captivity, and the nature of the violence that had occurred. Her survival, under conditions that had left her at the edge of death, ensured that the truth of what happened inside the villa would not remain entirely hidden. The case was no longer only about a crime that had occurred in isolation. It had become a national confrontation with questions of power, privilege, violence, and the vulnerability of those who were least protected within society. Rosaria Lopez and Donatella Colasanti did not move through the world as figures marked by notoriety or privilege. They lived within the ordinary rhythm of working-class Rome, a city where social boundaries were often visible in subtle but persistent ways, through neighborhoods, through opportunity, through the kinds of invitations one received and the circles one was allowed to enter. Rosaria, 19 years old, was at an age where adulthood had already begun to impose itself in practical terms rather than abstract ideals. Her life was shaped by limited resources and the expectations of survival in a city that demanded resilience more than comfort. Donatella, 17, was younger, still positioned at the threshold between adolescence and adulthood, navigating friendships and social experiences that carried the weight of curiosity and trust. Their bond was that of friendship, formed within a shared environment rather than extraordinary circumstance. And it was this very normalcy that made them vulnerable to what would later unfold. The social context of their lives is essential not because it explains the violence they endured, but because it shows how unremarkable their vulnerability was. They were not seeking danger. They were responding to what appeared to be a socially elevated invitation, one that promised access to a different world. That invitation came from Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Guerra, 3 young men whose public identities were shaped by wealth, education, and association with Rome's upper social strata. In contrast to Rosaria and Donatella, they moved within environments where privilege created both insulation and influence. Their presence in neo-fascist aligned circles added another layer of complexity to their social identity, situating them within ideological environments that valued power, dominance, and hierarchy. Yet to the outside observer, and certainly to the 2 young women, what mattered most in that moment was not ideology, but presentation, the promise of a gathering, the suggestion of leisure, the framing of inclusion. The invitation was not described as unusual or dangerous. It was presented as a small party, a private social meeting, an opportunity to spend time with people who appeared to belong to a more affluent and socially connected world. Alcohol was mentioned as part of the atmosphere, along with music and an informal setting that suggested ease rather than risk. For Rosaria and Donatella, this was not an invitation that immediately raised suspicion. It was instead interpreted through the lens of social aspiration and trust. The belief that stepping into a different environment did not necessarily mean stepping into danger. The villa in San Felice Surcio, where the meeting was to take place, represented a physical and symbolic separation from their everyday surroundings. Located along the coast near Rome, it was distant enough from urban visibility to allow privacy, yet accessible enough to feel like a natural extension of the city's social geography. When they arrived, the transition from expectation to reality began quietly. There was no immediate rupture in the sense of dramatic confrontation or obvious warning signs. Instead, what occurred was a gradual but decisive reconfiguration of space and control. The environment that had been framed as social began to function differently once they were inside. Doors that had simply been part of architecture became points of restriction. Movement that had been assumed to be free became subtly, then explicitly controlled. Communication with the outside world was cut off, and the structure of the gathering shifted from openness to confinement. This shift is crucial in understanding the psychological transformation that followed. For Rosaria and Donatella, the initial expectation of social interaction was replaced by a growing awareness that the normal rules governing hospitality and departure no longer applied. The presence of Izzo, Guido, and Gyra ceased to resemble that of hosts and began to reflect something more rigid and coercive. The control they exercised was not only physical but situational, shaping the environment in such a way that resistance became increasingly difficult to imagine as a viable option. What had been a space of presumed safety became a closed system in which the boundaries of action were defined entirely by those exerting power within it. Rosaria and Donatella found themselves isolated from external support, their autonomy reduced not through a single act, but through the accumulation of restrictions that built upon one another. The villa, once a neutral setting, became the site of enforced containment. Within this environment, their social identities, friends, daughters, young women from Rome, were stripped of any protective function. They were no longer participants in a social event, but subjects within a controlled situation. The significance of their background, their age, and their lack of social power becomes especially clear here, not as a narrative device, but as a factual contrast to the authority exercised by their captors. The imbalance was absolute, and it was this imbalance that defined the conditions under which the subsequent events unfolded. As the situation progressed, the sense of isolation deepened. Time within the villa no longer corresponded to normal social rhythm. Hours became indistinct, shaped not by external reference points, but by the internal logic of control imposed by the perpetrators. The psychological environment was marked by uncertainty, fear, and the erosion of any expectation of external intervention. In such conditions, the distinction between moment and duration begins to dissolve, replaced by continuous pressure that does not allow for recovery or stabilization. Rosaria and Donatella were held within this structure as it tightened around them, their ability to interpret or respond to events increasingly constrained by exhaustion and coercion. The importance of understanding this phase lies not in sensational detail, but in recognizing the mechanics of deprivation and control. What occurred was not a single moment of violence, but a sustained removal of autonomy within a confined space. The villa, in this sense, functioned as an isolated system in which external reality was effectively suspended for those inside it. Outside the walls, Rome continued its ordinary life, unaware of the transformation that had taken place within this private space. Inside, Rosaria and Donatella were being drawn deeper into a situation that would ultimately define the remainder of their lives. One through survival, the other through loss. Rosaria Lopez and Donatella Colasani entered the villa in San Felice Sersio at a moment that, on the surface, still resembled the beginning of an ordinary social evening. The setting was consistent with what they had been told, a private gathering, an informal party, a space where young people from different backgrounds might meet and share time together. There was nothing in the immediate appearance of the place that would have clearly signaled the violence that was about to unfold. And yet, within this same physical environment, the structure of their reality was about to be fundamentally rewritten. The three men they had arrived to meet, Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Gyra, did not behave as hosts in any conventional sense. Their role shifted almost immediately from social facilitators to controllers of space and movement. What began as an invitation became a confinement. The transition did not rely on a single dramatic moment, but on a rapid accumulation of restrictions. The ability to leave was removed, communication with the outside world was cut off, and the villa itself was transformed into a sealed environment governed entirely by the perpetrators. This was the first structural phase of the incident, where autonomy was stripped away not through negotiation, but through imposed physical and situational control. Once this boundary had been established, the conditions inside the villa became increasingly defined by coercion. Rosaria and Donatella were no longer participants in a social gathering. They were isolated individuals within a closed system where every aspect of movement and interaction was regulated by the three men. The environment was deliberately controlled to prevent resistance, escape, or outside awareness. In such a setting, even basic assumptions about safety or normal social behavior lose their meaning, replaced by a constant awareness of restriction and uncertainty. The perpetrators maintained dominance through a combination of intimidation and physical force, ensuring that any attempt at resistance would be immediately suppressed. Over time, the situation escalated into a sustained period of violence that extended across approximately 36 hours. Within this period, the victims were subjected to repeated acts of physical and psychological brutality. The available accounts and investigative findings describe a pattern of continuous abuse rather than isolated incidents. Sleep deprivation played a significant role in the breakdown of the victim's condition, as did forced consumption of alcohol and other substances mentioned in the case materials. These elements contributed to a growing state of disorientation, weakening both physical resistance and cognitive clarity. As time progressed, the distinction between individual moments became increasingly blurred. The villa functioned as an enclosed space where external references no longer mattered. There was no access to normal time markers, no communication with the outside world, and no indication that intervention was possible. This created a psychological environment characterized by exhaustion, fear, and the erosion of any expectation of escape. Rosaria Lopez, in particular, experienced a progressive physical collapse under the sustained violence. Her condition deteriorated to the point where she was no longer able to resist or remain conscious in a stable way. At a certain stage of the ordeal, she was taken into a bathroom within the villa. According to the established investigative record, it was there that she was submerged in a bathtub and killed by drowning. Following the prolonged period of abuse that had already severely weakened her body, her death did not end the violence within the villa, but it marked a decisive and irreversible moment in the sequence of events. It also intensified the psychological and physical danger faced by Donatella Colasani, who by this point had been subjected to similar levels of brutality and was believed by the perpetrators to be either dead or no longer capable of awareness. Following Rosaria's death, the perpetrators proceeded with a final stage of concealment and removal. Both Rosaria's body and Donatella's severely injured body were placed inside the trunk of a car. This act represented not only an attempt to move the victims, but also a continuation of control beyond the physical space of the villa. The trunk became another enclosed environment, dark and confined, extending the sense of isolation that had already defined the previous hours. Inside this space, Rosaria lay dead, while Donatella remained in a critical condition, drifting between consciousness and unconsciousness. The vehicle was driven away from the villa toward a more isolated area. At some point during this process, the perpetrators stopped the car and left it unattended while they went to eat. This moment of absence created an unguarded interval within an otherwise tightly controlled sequence of events. Inside the trunk, Donatella began to regain awareness. The conditions were extreme: confined space, darkness, physical injury, and proximity to her deceased friend. But within this environment, she became aware that she was still alive. Her initial response was not immediate action, but caution. She remained silent, likely recognizing that any noise could result in immediate discovery and further violence. This period of stillness is significant because it reflects a transition from passive endurance to active survival awareness. When the absence of the perpetrators continued and no immediate danger appeared, she made a decision that would ultimately determine her survival. She began to strike the interior of the trunk, producing sound in an attempt to attract attention from outside the vehicle. The noise she created was not initially answered by the perpetrators, but it carried beyond the immediate confines of the car. A nearby security guard heard the unusual sounds and recognized that something was wrong. This external awareness introduced the first element of intervention into a situation that had previously been entirely sealed off from outside influence. The guard contacted the authorities, initiating the first official response to the incident. Police arrived shortly thereafter and located the vehicle. Upon opening the trunk, they discovered Rosaria Lopez deceased and Donatella Colasani alive, but in a critical condition, suffering from severe injuries and trauma. The discovery immediately transformed the case from a missing person situation into a major criminal investigation. The severity of the injuries and the condition of the scene made it clear that the events involved prolonged and extreme violence rather than a brief or isolated act. As investigators began to reconstruct the sequence of events, attention quickly turned to identifying those responsible. Through early evidence and situational connections, the three men associated with the villa were identified: Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Guerra. The investigation moved rapidly due to the seriousness of the crime and the clarity of the link between the victims and the suspects. Izzo was arrested first, followed shortly by Guido. Andrea Guerra, however, managed to evade capture and left Italy, becoming a fugitive who would remain hidden for years under assumed identity until his eventual death while in hiding. The investigation established that the events inside the villa were not accidental or spontaneous, but rather the result of a controlled environment in which the victims were deliberately isolated and subjected to sustained violence over a defined period. The discovery of the car and its contents provided the first concrete confirmation of the full extent of what had occurred during those 36 hours. With the suspects identified and arrests underway, the case transitioned from immediate investigation into the beginning of formal legal proceedings, where the evidence gathered and the testimony of the surviving victim would become central to understanding the full scope of the crime. Inside the official investigation of the Sersio massacre, the case moved quickly from a chaotic crime scene into a structured legal process that attempted to reconstruct, with precision and evidence, what had occurred during those 36 hours inside the villa. The discovery of Rosaria Lopez's body and the survival of Donatella Colasani created an immediate dual urgency for investigators. First, to stabilize and document the surviving victim's condition and testimony, and second, to secure and interpret the physical evidence that could explain how such an extended and controlled act of violence had been carried out without interruption. Donatella, despite her critical physical state, became the central witness from the earliest stages of the investigation. Her testimony was not delivered in a single moment, but emerged gradually, shaped by medical recovery and repeated questioning under careful procedural conditions. What she described formed the foundation of the investigative narrative, an invitation that appeared social and harmless, followed by immediate restriction upon arrival at the villa, and then a prolonged period of confinement under the control of three men whose behavior escalated into sustained violence. Investigators carefully correlated her account with the physical layout of the villa, identifying how spaces had been used to isolate the victims and maintain control. The structure of the house itself became part of the evidentiary framework, as rooms and enclosed areas corresponded with the stages of confinement and abuse described in her statement. The transition from social gathering to controlled detention was confirmed not through a single piece of evidence, but through the convergence of multiple indicators: the lack of external communication, the physical confinement of the victims, and the absence of any signs suggesting voluntary participation once the initial entry had occurred. As the investigation progressed, authorities identified Angelo Izzo, Johnny Guido, and Andrea Guerra as the primary suspects. This identification was not arbitrary, but based on witness connections, prior associations, and the reconstruction of the events leading up to the arrival at the villa. Izzo was arrested first, followed shortly by Guido. Their detention allowed investigators to begin formal interrogations, during which inconsistencies and confirmations between accounts were analyzed. Guerra, however, had already fled, initiating a separate phase of the investigation focused on tracking a fugitive who had left Italy and was attempting to disappear within foreign jurisdictions. The separation of the suspects immediately complicated the legal process, as two were in custody while one remained beyond reach, creating a fragmented but still coherent prosecutorial framework. Within the interrogation phase, the role of Donatella Colasanti's testimony became even more significant. Her account was not treated as isolated recollection, but as a structured narrative that needed to be verified against physical evidence and suspect statements. Investigators examined the timeline she provided, comparing it with forensic findings at the villa, including signs of prolonged restraint, evidence of physical violence, and the condition in which Rosaria Lopez was found. The convergence of these elements strengthened the reliability of her testimony and allowed investigators to establish a consistent sequence of events. Importantly, her description also clarified the duration of the ordeal, confirming that the victims were held for approximately 36 hours, a period marked by continuous control and escalating brutality. This temporal framework became central to the prosecution's understanding of the case, as it distinguished the incident from spontaneous violence and established it as a sustained act of confinement and abuse. The investigation also documented the final phase of the crime, in which both victims were placed in the trunk of a vehicle. This detail, confirmed through both forensic examination and testimony, indicated an attempt to relocate or conceal the outcome of the violence. It was during this stage that Donatella's survival became a critical evidentiary turning point. Her recollection of regaining partial consciousness inside the trunk, remaining silent to avoid detection, and then striking the interior to signal for help provided investigators with a rare and direct account of survival under extreme conditions. This account aligned with the physical discovery made by police, who confirmed that the sound from the vehicle had been noticed by a security guard, leading to the intervention that ultimately revealed the crime. The procedural response to the case escalated rapidly due to its severity. Once the suspects were identified and arrests began, the investigation was elevated to national importance. Law enforcement agencies coordinated across jurisdictions to secure evidence, track the fugitive suspect, and prepare the case for prosecution. The villa itself was treated as a primary crime scene, carefully examined for traces of activity that could corroborate the timeline established through testimony. Each room, object, and spatial arrangement was analyzed for its relevance to the sequence of events described by the survivor. As evidence accumulated, the prosecution built its case around a combination of testimonial consistency, physical documentation, and suspect involvement. The arrest of Izzo and Guido provided direct access to the individuals accused of participating in the crime, allowing investigators to confront them with evidence and cross-reference their statements with Donatella's account. Meanwhile, the absence of Gaira introduced a procedural complication, but not one that undermined the overall structure of the case, which remained supported by strong forensic and testimonial alignment. The investigation phase ultimately established a clear narrative framework: the invitation, the arrival at the villa, the immediate imposition of control, the sustained period of violence, the death of Rosaria Lopez, the placement of both victims in a vehicle, and the eventual discovery triggered by Donatella's survival and signaling. This sequence became the foundation upon which the legal proceedings would be constructed. As the case transitioned toward trial, the focus shifted from reconstruction to accountability, with investigators preparing to present a cohesive and evidence-based account of events before the court. The surviving victim's testimony, already central during the investigative phase, would continue to serve as a critical pillar in the judicial process, ensuring that the events inside the villa could not be reduced to abstraction or speculation, but would instead be examined in their full, documented reality. Inside the courtroom, the Curcio case did not unfold as a simple recounting of facts, but as a structured attempt by the Italian justice system to translate an almost unimaginable sequence of violence into legal language, evidentiary standards, and procedural clarity. The trial phase began after the arrests of Angelo Izzo and Johnny Guido, while Andrea Gaira remained a fugitive outside Italy, complicating but not halting the proceedings. From the outset, the courtroom atmosphere was defined by a tension between legal formality and public emotional intensity. The case had already become a national reference point, and every procedural step carried the weight of public expectation. The prosecution's task was to demonstrate not only that a crime had occurred, but that it had been coordinated, sustained, and executed with deliberate intent over a prolonged period of confinement. The structure of the indictment reflected this necessity, focusing on the sequence of events established during the investigation. The invitation to the villa, the immediate restriction of freedom upon arrival, the sustained violence over approximately 36 hours, the death of Rosaria Lopez, and the subsequent concealment attempt involving the car trunk. Each of these elements was presented not as isolated incidents, but as interconnected stages of a single continuous act of criminal conduct. A central pillar of the prosecution's case was the testimony of Donatella Colasani, whose survival transformed her into the primary eyewitness to the events inside the villa. Her presence in court carried a significance that extended beyond legal testimony. She represented both the evidentiary core of the case and the human reality behind its abstract legal definitions. Her account, already given during the investigation phase, was revisited in court with careful procedural structure, ensuring consistency with earlier statements and alignment with physical evidence. She described the initial arrival at the villa under the belief that she and Rosaria were attending a social gathering, followed by the immediate shift in environment that marked the beginning of their confinement. Her testimony outlined the progression of control exercised by the three men, the sustained nature of the violence, and the eventual physical collapse of Rosaria Lopez. Each detail was examined in relation to forensic findings, including the condition of the villa and the medical evidence confirming the cause of Rosaria's death by drowning in a bathtub after severe physical trauma. The defense strategy, as reflected in the proceedings, attempted to challenge elements of sequence and responsibility, but the consistency of Donatella's testimony, combined with physical evidence, created a framework that was difficult to dismantle. Investigators had already established that the environment within the villa was not one of spontaneous chaos, but of sustained control. and this interpretation was reinforced in court by the convergence of testimonial and forensic data. The prosecution emphasized the duration of the ordeal, approximately 36 hours, as a key factor distinguishing the case from impulsive violence. This time frame demonstrated continuity of action and intent, reinforcing the legal classification of the events as a prolonged act of confinement and abuse rather than isolated incidents. The presence and actions of the three accused men were examined individually and collectively. Angelo Izzo and Johnny Guido, both present in custody, were directly subjected to questioning and cross-examination. Their statements were compared against Donatella's testimony and the physical evidence recovered. From the villa, Andrea Guira's absence introduced a procedural limitation, but his role was still reconstructed through investigative findings and co-accused statements. The court treated his fugitive status as part of the broader evidentiary landscape, rather than a gap in narrative coherence. Throughout the proceedings, the court also addressed the final phase of the crime, the placement of both victims in the trunk of a car. This detail carried significant weight in establishing intent beyond the confines of the villa. It demonstrated an attempt to control the aftermath of the violence and to manage the visibility of its consequences. Donatella's survival and subsequent actions inside the trunk were presented as a critical turning point, not only in the narrative of the crime, but in the initiation of police intervention. Her act of striking the trunk and attracting attention led indirectly to the discovery of the crime scene, connecting her survival to the exposure of the entire sequence of events. After reviewing the accumulated evidence, the court delivered its verdict. Angelo Izzo and Johnny Guido were convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, or its equivalent under the Italian penal system at the time. The judgment reflected the court's assessment of coordinated participation in a prolonged and exceptionally violent crime. The legal reasoning emphasized both individual responsibility and collective action, recognizing that the crime had been carried out through shared involvement within a controlled environment. Andrea Guira, still absent, was also convicted in absentia. His sentence aligned with the findings applied to the other two defendants. The verdict phase did not conclude the legal and social implications of the case. In the aftermath of sentencing, the Italian justice system faced scrutiny regarding aspects of sentencing policy, including provisions that allowed for potential sentence reductions or temporary release under certain conditions. These legal mechanisms became a point of controversy, particularly in relation to Angelo Izzo, who was later granted temporary release and subsequently became involved in another serious criminal case, intensifying public debate over judicial reform and risk assessment. The trial of the Sersio massacre thus extended beyond its immediate legal outcome. It exposed tensions within the justice system between punishment, rehabilitation, and public safety, and it raised enduring questions about how such extreme acts of violence should be addressed within a legal framework designed for broader application. Yet at the center of the proceedings remained the testimony of survival and loss, the account of Donatella Colasani and the confirmed death of Rosario Lopez. The court's findings transformed these individual experiences into formal legal recognition, ensuring that what occurred inside the villa was not only documented, but adjudicated within the highest structures of state authority. The verdict closed one chapter of the case, but it did not conclude its significance. The legal outcome became part of a larger social reckoning, one that would continue to shape discussions of violence, accountability, and the protection of vulnerable individuals within Italian society for years to come. In the aftermath of the Sersio massacre trial, the legal proceedings may have reached a formal conclusion, but the social consequences extended far beyond the courtroom, embedding themselves into Italian public consciousness in a way that few criminal cases had before. The verdicts against Angelo Izzo and Johnny Guido, alongside the conviction in absentia of Andrea Guira, provided a sense of judicial closure. Yet they could not contain the broader cultural shock that followed the full revelation of what had occurred inside the villa in San Felice Surcio. The case had already moved beyond the category of criminal incident and into the realm of national trauma. Not because of a single act alone, but because of the sustained nature of the violence, the social identities of those involved, and the survival of one victim whose testimony made the hidden visible. In the public imagination, the case became a mirror reflecting uncomfortable contradictions within Italian society. The coexistence of privilege and brutality, the fragility of assumed safety, and the limits of institutional protection for vulnerable individuals. One of the most significant dimensions of the aftermath was the way the case intersected with broader conversations about violence against women. The detailed reconstruction of the 36 hours of captivity, combined with the testimony of Donatella Colasani, forced a public confrontation with forms of violence that had often been minimized, ignored, or treated as isolated rather than systemic. The brutality described in the case was not presented as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality, one that had unfolded within a private space shielded from public view until chance intervention and survival brought it into the open. This shift in visibility played a critical role in shaping public discourse. It challenged existing narratives that tended to separate private violence from public concern and instead emphasized that such acts could occur within seemingly ordinary social contexts, even when facilitated by individuals from socially advantaged backgrounds. The gender dimension of the violence also became central to public interpretation. The fact that both victims were young women, and that the perpetrators were young men from a different social stratum, contributed to a growing awareness of how power, gender, and social privilege could intersect in ways that produced extreme vulnerability. While the legal system addressed responsibility in terms of individual guilt and sentencing, public discussion increasingly framed the case within broader patterns of gender-based violence, contributing to a shift in how such crimes were understood within Italian society. This shift was not immediate or uniform, but the Surcio case became one of the reference points around which later discussions of violence against women would develop, particularly in relation to questions of prevention, protection, and institutional response. The social impact of the case also extended into the realm of class perception. The fact that the perpetrators were associated with wealth, education, and politically charged social circles added a layer of discomfort to public reaction. It disrupted assumptions that extreme violence was primarily associated with social marginalization or economic deprivation. Instead, the case demonstrated that brutality could emerge from within privileged environments, challenging simplistic associations between social status and moral behavior. This aspect of the case contributed to a broader reflection on how privilege can operate not only as access to opportunity, but also as a form of insulation from scrutiny, at least until the legal system intervenes. Within this context, the survival of Donatella Colasani took on a significance that extended beyond her role as a witness in court. Her testimony became part of the public record of the case, but it also evolved into a symbol of survival under conditions of extreme violence. Her account of confinement, abuse, and eventual rescue transformed her into a central figure in how the case was remembered and discussed. At the same time, her survival did not diminish the reality of loss, particularly the death of Rosario Lopez, whose absence remained a defining element of the case's emotional weight. Together, their stories formed a dual narrative of tragedy and survival that shaped public understanding of what had occurred inside the villa. In a legal and academic sphere, the Surcio case began to be examined as a reference point in discussions of criminal law, forensic investigation, and social response to violent crime. The structured nature of the violence, the prolonged duration of confinement, and the combination of physical and psychological coercion made the case relevant to studies of criminal behavior and legal classification. It also raised questions about the adequacy of existing legal frameworks in addressing crimes that combined multiple forms of abuse over extended periods. While the court had delivered its verdict based on the laws in place at the time, the case later contributed to ongoing discussions about sentencing structures, temporary release policies, and the assessment of risk in cases involving severe violent offenses. The later controversy surrounding Angelo Izzo, who was granted temporary release and subsequently involved in another serious criminal incident, intensified these debates and reinforced public concern about the balance between rehabilitation and public safety. Beyond institutional analysis, the cultural memory of the Curcio massacre persisted through media representations, documentaries, and public discourse. The case was revisited repeatedly, not for sensational purposes, but because it represented a turning point in how certain forms of violence were acknowledged and discussed in public space. Each retelling of the case carried with it the responsibility of representing both the factual sequence of events and the human consequences embedded within them. In this sense, the case became part of a broader narrative tradition in which true crime stories serve not only as accounts of wrongdoing, but also as reflections on social structures and collective awareness. Over time, the Curcio massacre came to be recognized as one of the most significant violent crimes in modern European history, not solely because of its brutality, but because of its lasting impact on legal, social, and cultural frameworks. It continues to be studied within criminology and sociology as an example of how violence can emerge within privileged environments, how victims' testimony can shape legal outcomes, and how public awareness of systemic issues can evolve through individual cases. The legacy of the case is therefore not confined to the events of 1975 or the courtroom proceedings that followed, but extends into ongoing discussions about justice, protection, and the recognition of violence in all its forms. At the center of this legacy remains the contrast between two outcomes: the irreversible loss of Rosaria Lopez and the survival of Donatella Colasani. Together, their experiences defined the emotional and historical core of the case. Rosaria's death represents the finality of unchecked violence within a closed system, while Donatella's survival represents the fragile but crucial possibility of exposure and truth emerging from within that same system. It is this duality, loss and survival, silence and testimony, that ensures the Curcio massacre remains not only a historical event, but a continuing point of reflection on the conditions that allow such violence to occur and the mechanisms through which it is eventually brought to light. The legacy of the Curcio massacre does not sit neatly within a single category of history, law, or media memory. Instead, it persists as an overlapping structure of all three, continuously revisited and reinterpreted through legal scholarship, social analysis, and cultural reflection. What began as a criminal investigation into a single villa in San Felice, Curcio, gradually evolved into a reference point for understanding how violence can be produced, sustained, and ultimately exposed within modern society. The final legal judgments delivered against Angelo Izzo and Johnny Guido, along with the conviction in absentia of Andrea Guerra, provided a formal endpoint to judicial proceedings, but they did not close the interpretive space the case opened. In many ways, the verdicts marked the beginning of a longer social process in which Italy was forced to confront the implications of what had occurred. Over time, the case became embedded in discussions of criminal justice as an example of how extreme acts of violence challenge standard legal categories. The sustained nature of the abuse over approximately 36 hours, the structured confinement of the victims, and the combination of psychological and physical coercion required investigators and legal professionals to treat the case not as a spontaneous crime, but as a prolonged system of domination. This distinction has remained important in criminological studies, where the Curcio massacre is often referenced when examining crimes that involve extended control within isolated environments. It demonstrated how criminal acts can evolve over time within a confined space, and how legal systems must reconstruct not only individual actions, but continuous sequences of behavior. Beyond its legal classification, the case also became a focal point in discussions about institutional responsibility and sentencing policy. The subsequent controversies surrounding conditional release practices in Italy, particularly in relation to Angelo Izzo, intensified debates about how justice systems evaluate risk and rehabilitation in cases involving extreme violence. When Izzo was later granted temporary release and subsequently involved in another serious criminal incident, public concern over the adequacy of judicial safeguards was renewed. This development did not alter the original convictions, but it reshaped the way the Curcio case was discussed in policy contexts, reinforcing questions about whether existing legal frameworks were sufficient to manage individuals convicted of exceptionally violent crimes. In academic environments, the case has been analyzed across multiple disciplines. In criminology, it is often used to examine group dynamics in violent offending, particularly how shared environments and collective decision-making can contribute to sustained abuse. In sociology, it is studied as an example of how class differences intersect with perceptions of vulnerability and protection, especially given the contrast between the privileged backgrounds of the perpetrators and the working-class backgrounds of the victims. In legal studies, it is referenced in discussions about evidentiary reconstruction, particularly the role of survivor testimony in establishing timelines and verifying sequences of events in cases where direct observation is impossible. The testimony of Donatella Colasanti remains central in all these analyses, not only because of its evidentiary value, but because it represents one of the few direct narrative accounts of what occurred inside the villa. Her survival allowed investigators and courts to reconstruct a closed environment that would otherwise have remained partially inaccessible to external understanding. At the same time, her account is treated with procedural caution in academic contexts, highlighting the balance between survivor testimony and corroborating physical evidence in judicial processes. Culturally, the Curcio massacre has been revisited through documentaries, journalistic retrospectives, and historical examinations. These representations tend to focus not only on the brutality of the crime itself, but on its broader implications for Italian society in the 1970s and beyond. The case is frequently positioned within a historical moment marked by social tension, political extremism, and evolving public awareness of gender-based violence. Each retelling contributes to an ongoing process of collective memory formation, in which the events are not merely recalled, but interpreted through contemporary values and concerns. Despite these repeated examinations, the core facts of the case remain unchanged. 2 young women were taken to a villa under the pretense of a social gathering, subjected to prolonged confinement and violence, and emerged with only one survivor who could provide testimony about what occurred. This factual core continues to anchor all subsequent interpretations, ensuring that the case remains grounded in documented reality rather than abstract narrative. The long-term legacy of the Curcio massacre also lies in its influence on public awareness of violence against women. While the legal system addressed responsibility in terms of criminal liability, the social response expanded into broader questions about prevention, protection, and recognition of risk. The visibility of the case contributed to a shift in how such violence was discussed in public discourse, moving it from a largely private or isolated framing into a more systemic understanding. This shift did not occur immediately, nor was it uniform across all sectors of society. But the case served as one of the catalysts for a changing conversation. In the end, the Curcio massacre remains significant not only because of the severity of the crime, but because of the way it exposed the limits and capabilities of institutions tasked with responding to extreme violence. It demonstrated how a single case can reverberate across legal systems, academic fields, and cultural memory, leaving behind not only a record of what happened, but a continuing framework for how such events are understood. The contrast at the heart of the case between irreversible loss and survival continues to define its meaning. Rosaria Lopez's death represents the final consequence of unchecked violence within a controlled environment, while Donatella Colasanni's survival represents the fragile but decisive possibility of exposure, testimony, and truth entering the public record. Together, they form the enduring center of a case that has not faded into history, but continues to shape how violence, justice, and memory are understood.